Well, we'll turn kind of to Christ now. Would you just share with us your kind of background? What brought you to this?
Well, I was born and raised Catholic.
Yep.
As many Hispanics, Latinos are these days. Catholicism for me was tradition. There wasn't really a relationship.
Yeah.
It was just mom and dad was Catholic, so therefore I'm
What we
Catholic.
do.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
So I was baptized in my whole first communion, served as an altar boy the whole time.
Wow.
And as I got a little older, life started happening. My parents split. My stepfather came into the picture. He's a Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
And so prior to, during my mother and father's divorce, they sent me to Puerto Rico for a summer because my father was transitioning out of the house. And so I experienced the Pentecostal faith.
Okay.
And this was very charismatic, very radical, kind of Pentecostal. Scared the Jesus out of me.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah.
I mean, they were doing all kinds of crazy things.
Right, especially from going from like Catholic, where it's like very
regimented.
Yeah, regimented.
To very charismatic Pentecostal. I had no idea what was going on. And so then I came back home. Again, my stepfather is in the picture. He's a Jehovah's Witness. And so we did that and experience that for about 5 years, from about 11 to 16.
Yep.
At that point, I was completely jaded with religion.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of men in my life who were supposed to be men of God and were one day or one way, Monday through Friday, Saturday, and then on Sunday they're a wholly different person.
Sure.
And so I got this impression that if that's God, I don't want it.
Right on.
And so for most of my adult life, I really ran from religion. I got into New Age. I didn't know it was New Age at the time.
Just looking to fill that hole.
Exactly.
Something, right? What's it going to be?
So I got into the universe and, you know, the secret, the kind of big New Age thing, but I didn't get it. So I kept running, and I literally ran. I joined the military and traveled the world, did that, didn't want to hear it. And so I had a friend who would always minister to me, and I never wanted to hear it. I was like, dude, get out of here with that.
Right.
Can't we just hang out? Like, I don't want to talk about religion or Christ.
Yeah.
And he never gave up on me.
Yeah.
So after life happened, some deployments, right, and all that, I started a business, and it failed miserably.
Okay.
And so a woman had approached me about investing in my business, and she says, I can't meet with you any other day except for Sunday, so you got to come to church with me.
Okay.
And then after church, we'll go have a meeting and see if I'll be willing to invest in your business. This was the setup.
Right.
This
Okay.
was
I
God
like it.
setting me up.
Yeah, sure.
And so I get to the church that day. I was a back row Baptist. I had no intention on participating. And I got something so much more that day.
That day.
That day.
Okay.
And I went in there, and at the end of the service,
This is awesome.
I didn't care what the preacher was saying. I wasn't really paying attention, but he did an altar call. And he says, there's somebody in here right now that is ready to give their life to Christ. And I had no idea. And so I literally, John, if I can tell you, I felt something pulling me out of my chair, but I felt something pulling me back down. And I did that for 5 minutes. And then he just held the altar call. I didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And so finally, I got up and I walked to that altar. And I fell to my knees. I'm not a real crier. And it was only one of 3 times that I was slain in the spirit. And I sobbed for 20 minutes uncontrollably.
Right up there at the altar.
Right at the altar.
Wow.
And I got up and we went to the meeting. Never spoke business.
Yeah.
All I could talk about was how excited I was about meeting my Christ. And so I'm driving home, and the only thought that I had was, how am I going to explain this to my wife?
Yeah.
We never talked about religion. We never really talked about faith.
Sure.
How am I going to tell her that my life has been changed forever and it'll never, I can't go back?
Right. Yeah.
I was terrified. I got home, and I told her what happened. And she says, okay. She says, well, I have something to tell you. And I said, what's that? She says, when I got divorced from my ex-husband, I told God I would never step foot in the church again until my husband led me. And so she had been silently waiting, never mentioning anything to me, for the Lord to prepare her husband to lead her back to the church. And so it's been history ever since, man.
That is a testimony, my man.
Yeah.
That's a great story. So having, met the Lord and been moved on that level, like how long was it before you said, you know what, like this is like what I got to do as a pastor?
I didn't know right away. There were a lot of people who were speaking into my life and were saying things to me, and I was like, look, can I just go to church? Like, I'm just getting into this. I just want to read.
Sure.
And people kept saying, no, you got a bigger calling, I don't want to hear that. And so again, the gentleman who was preaching and ministering to me all these years, he said to me, hey, I want to do a Bible study. Would you mind us having some people over with you?
Yeah.
Sure. So that turned into, hey, why don't you teach the Bible study? And I said, well, I never taught a Bible study. Okay. So I did some study and I prepared a week lesson, which looking back on it was horrible. But you got to get started, right?
Right on.
So you got to get started.
Yeah.
And so I taught the Bible study. We did that for a few months, and then he was a preacher. He was already preaching. He says, "Hey, would you mind guest preaching for me?" I said, "Well, I never preached, but okay, give it a shot. I'll trust in the Lord."
Sure.
And so I did that, and then they asked me to come back the next week. Okay. And then they asked me to come back again, and I realized that the pastor was on sabbatical.
Okay.
And so I stayed there for a year.
Wow.
And it was really my first pastor, my interim pastor. I really cut my teeth.
Yeah, like trial by fire.
But again, it was a setup.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, come preach for a day. For,
right. Yeah.
Try
whatever. It once.
And I ended up there, and then God called me out of that church after a year. And then a week later, someone came to me and says, hey, I organized a church for you. Here you go.
1 week later.
A week later. They gave me a pack of papers that I didn't know. They said, we've been preparing for your arrival. The Lord told us to establish a church for you. And so they incorporated the church and did all the paperwork, and they handed me the stack of papers, and they go, here's your church.
That's crazy.
And it was all organized, and this was just guys setting it up.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we launched a house church, and that was House to House Ministry.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, question, early on in the transition, after, you said there were people speaking into your life. My question is, did you have either internally a voice saying, hey, maybe this isn't going to be for real, maybe I got excited about a day, or anybody say, hey, Will, like, that's cool and all, but, come back to me whenever you're back to being well?
A lot.
And how did you address that?
Well, so there was both, right? So there was this internal thing, and I think this is the devil trying to steal the seed. Then there were also people who were like, you're not who you used to be, like, I don't like this. And so those people have obviously have since faded out of my life.
Sure.
Because I wasn't willing to compromise the eternal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For the temporal.
Yeah.
And so it was a real struggle at first.
Yeah.
And a lot of those were happening with the people closest to me. And so that was a real struggle.
It's an impact. I mean, it's tough whenever someone says, hey, this is a phase, dude. Like,
right, yeah, you'll get through this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't want to get through this.
Right.
That's exactly right.
I had an experience where a bunch of things were leading me.
Sure.
I ran into people, and then I started kind of having an informal Bible study with a friend, and just started, hey, read Joshua and tell me what you think about that. What do you think about Joseph? He was in this situation, like, how would you have handled Potiphar's wife? And at some point, she said, I think it's time to start maybe looking at churches. So I went and looked at a few, and ended up in Emmanuel, where you're a pastor now.
Sure.
And I was kind of feeling like I was being led, but I tried a bunch of stuff to fill the hole, like we were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And nothing lasted. And I didn't want to say, hey, I want to make you this commitment, and then 6 months later be back to, trying the next thing. I didn't want to have that buyer's remorse, for lack of a better term.
Right.
So, but I kind of felt like it was getting closer, that I was going to commit to it, but I was like, not today kind of thing. So Pastor Bill actually did a altar call, and he said, at the end, he said, if you were to die today, you don't know where you'd end up, if you want to, commit yourself to the Lord and be secure in your eternity, raise your hand. And I was in the back row myself, or next to the back row. I didn't want to be the final row because that was too close. Someone might have been able to lean over and talk to me or whatever. I wanted to be unapproachable.
That's right.
And invisible.
Yeah.
So he said that. He said, raise your hand. Okay? So I shot my hand up, and then he said, oh, okay, the gentleman in the back, I see you. I thought, oh, today's my day, right?
Yeah.
Like there was no hide. I was like, okay, Lord, today's my day. So it was like, I think God knew that, again, I was like, I needed a little nudge.
Yeah.
And if there were 3 or 4 other people, I would have been able to skate out without making the commitment that day. But it was like, he said, I see you back there. We're in a different time right now that literally is just a bombs. Mm-hmm. And there's so much noise associated with this. There's genuine concern. There are moments where I think, you get a little panic in your gut. Take a deep breath. Okay, this is going to work out. I've got faith in God. I don't know how it's going to work out. It's going to work out. how do you, as a pastor, what would you like to say to the people that are watching this, that are going through this and maybe just scared and not knowing what's going to happen?
Well, I appreciate that question because I think this is a very uncertain time, not only in terms of faith and the attack on truth that we have today, but also with what we have health-wise and environmentally, right? With the coronavirus and everything going on, a lot of churches are shutting down. A lot of churches are not having service right now, and so I think there's a lot of Christians and those who are not that we can help that have this idea that if you're fearful that you're a bad Christian. And I don't really believe that to be true. I think that fear is a really important, healthy component in the scriptures. But there's a difference between having a spirit of fear, right, which the Bible says that we weren't given a spirit of fear, versus having those worries, having those cares and concerns.
Sure.
The Bible even says that knowledge begins with the fear of the Lord. I think what people forget is that if there isn't fear, how can you be courageous? Faith doesn't exist without its opposite, right? So if faith doesn't exist without doubt and anxiety and all of those things, then that's actually what constitutes your faith. That you're willing to step outside of that. You won't be confined by a spirit of fear. Yeah. Because what does a spirit of fear do? It binds you, it imprisons you.
Cripples you, I mean.
Exactly, it cripples you. But for someone to have just that healthy, natural level of anxiety and worry, and I would challenge anyone to explore the scriptures, Old Testament and New, and find any of the patriarchs, any of these giants in the faith in scripture, and find any one of them that didn't have fear, that didn't have moments of doubt and anxiety. But all of these giants in the faith and righteousness was credited to them because they were willing to step out of that fear, step out of that comfort zone that they had, and they were willing to move forward. And some of them, as we learn through other historical accounts, were martyred for their faith, or things didn't end well for them. But the glory that was beyond that far exceeded what they were going through.
Amen. So kind of as we conclude, Pastor, I would like to just kind of turn it over to you. And if you've got, anything that you want to just kind of leave us with, final thoughts, and the floor is yours.
The truth of the matter is with our, and again, I really appreciate, you really stepping out in faith and walking in your passion with comics. And, comics is a way for us to have an outlet in our lives and enjoy just these stories. But the greatest story that was ever told is written in a book that is the greatest and most published book in all of history. And so if you want to really read about a superhero, start in Genesis and read to Revelations, and I think you'll see in the entire narrative the greatest superhero ever known. And what I love about the scriptures is that in the Old Testament, the superhero is shadowed or is covered with a veil and doesn't reveal himself until this amazing final act, which we see in the Gospels and through the crucifixion of Jesus. And then he gives us hope for what's to come. And so he says, okay, well, you've read up to this point, but it ain't over. And so he says, look, I gave you the victory. And so no matter what you're going through out there, and if you're watching this video later on, Christ says he gave us the victory. And if we would just hold on to him, if we would just hold on to his strength and not our own, he'll give us the victory. And if we read Revelations, we won.
Amen.
We won.
Amen.
And so I think if we can just hold on to that and share that message of hope, this is a really dark time. And a lot of people need that hope.
I agree.
And I think, and I appreciate you so much, John, because you're exercising your faith, sharing the gospel in a way that's relevant.
Well, thank you.
And so a lot of kids won't go to church in that way. But if we can attract them through this type of vehicle, this avenue, I think this is amazing. I think this is great, and I appreciate the work you're doing.
I really appreciate you coming out and having a coffee with me this morning, sitting down, and I learned some stuff and had a couple laughs. And thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it, man.